Hello, Paddy. It's so good to see you, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks very much for the invitation, and I look forward to the conversation with you.
Paddy, the first time I heard about you was very recently. I was at one of India's top chess players' home, Vidit Gujarati, who also recently played the candidates along with Gukesh. And he showed me your book, The Barefoot Coach. And he said this book has made a deep impression on him. And I started reading a few pages and I really liked it. And I was so surprised when the news broke out that you are working with Gukesh for his World Championship match. It's just something like a crossover of two universes.
Thanks very much for that. I wrote the book sort of 3, 4 years ago, really sharing some of the best lessons I've learned from mostly working with some of the best cricketers in the world. I've obviously done a lot of work in India and worked with the likes of, the Tendulkars and Dravids and Virat Kohlis of this world. So it's been awesome to, spend some time working with the Indian hockey team in their Olympic campaign earlier this year. So it's been fascinating to work in a few different sports. But as you say, probably for me, one of the most interesting and unexpected was to be working with Gukesh.
Yeah. Could you tell us how it happened? Like, how did this come about?
So the academy that supports Gukesh, that Vishy Anant also supports, they reached out to me, in fact, through the Olympic
Waka.
Gold Committee. And they'd heard about the work that I'd done with the cricket and the hockey, and I'd also done some work with PV Sindhu. And they asked if I'd be interested in supporting Gukesh in his World Championship campaign. And initially, I'd never worked in chess; I'd never really considered it. But once I was a short way into my first introductory conversation with Gukesh, it was very quick to see that he was a very grounded, humble, highly intelligent, and exciting individual to work with, in a very exciting journey towards the World Championship.
Yeah, he's actually going to play against Ding Liren, and the narrative that is being spoken about widely is how Ding is not in his best form, and how Gukesh is doing really well. And while it is spoken unanimously by everyone, even Ding himself says this in many of the interviews. It is a kind of a tricky terrain to be walking on, right? As a player.
I think the trickiness of that terrain is believing those stories and preparing with those stories in mind. And the temptation then will be to slightly cut some corners in preparation, thinking this is a foregone conclusion, which is very dangerous for anyone. The reality is Ding is world champion. He's world champion because he played the kind of chess that got him to that position, and he has the ability at any given day, any given moment, to be able to refine and reconnect with that form that got him to be world champion. So it would be a miss, and certainly Gukesh is not um, preparing as if he's going to win, and he's certainly not preparing as if he's going to meet an off-form Ding. His preparation is to meet, as perfect as it can be. He's preparing as thoroughly as can be with the expectation that he meets an on-form Ding and that he's prepares to beat. Even if Ding arrives and plays at his best, Gukesh needs to be prepared to beat him at his best, which is, that's the smart thinking. And if anything else happens, that's just a bonus.
Mm, right. And I mean from Gukesh, when you mentioned he's a very well balanced youngster. How has it been for you to interact, because he's just 18 years old? From what I have been interacting with him for years. I've always felt he's way beyond his years. He's so mature.
Yeah. So, sort of the context I have is obviously working with a number of other athletes from other sports. And I haven't worked with many sort of 17, 18-year-olds. Normally, the athletes I work with are sort of from their sort of early 20s through into their mid 30s. So, Gukesh would be one of the younger. And I tend not to work with young athletes because they don't yet have the maturity. A lot of them don't have the ability to self-reflect and have self-awareness, which for mental coaching, that's one of the most important ingredients for high quality mental coaching conversation is the athlete needs to have self-awareness, the ability to self-reflect. And in that regard, Gukesh really is, he would be without a doubt, the um, the smartest, most intellectual, intelligent, self-aware athlete, almost athlete, never mind 18-year-old that I've worked with. And it makes sense because a lot of, cricketer, their main primary skill is batting or bowling, and badminton player, their primary skill is hitting a shuttle, and the hockey players, their primary skill, it's all physical. And then the mental is a bolt-on or a part of that, where with a chess player, almost all of the skill is primarily mental, and it's that balance between the thinking brain and the instinctive brain. And the only physical part is really being able to sit for that length of time, in comfort. That's really the physical part. So it would make sense that, the brain bring the primary performance tool, that Bukesh's primary performance tool as someone challenging for the world championship is one incredibly powerful and high functioning tool.
Right, right. But for you, chess players, they generally tend to prepare a lot on the board. Like they prepare their openings a lot, even at the high level. They spend a lot of time working on their openings. Where do you see this mental work fitting in? Because I think it's a very important thing, but not many chess players focus on it.
Yeah, so I mean, sure, you can. A lot of chess players, I would imagine, spend time preparing their opening moves because that's what you can prepare for. It's more difficult to prepare for the middle game and prepare for the end game. So, even with all the preparation, it's been interesting to see the balance between the thinking and the preparation and the calculations that go on during a game, and the instinctiveness. So, the more a chess player thinks and the more they think deeper and deeper into the game, the more time they will obviously take for each move. And if they do that too many times, they put themselves under time pressure. Where, on the other side, you've got someone like a Magnus Carlsen who doesn't think too deep. He plays more on instinct, so he tends not to put himself under time pressure. So it's a real delicate balance, between a chess player finding what is my real strength in the balance between my ability to think deep into a game versus to be able to play instinctively, and to find that happy balance, which means playing to your strengths, but also giving yourself sufficient time to think through all the options, but also not put yourself under time pressure. So that's just one example of finding that really delicate balance between thinking, instinct, and time.
Very interesting. For you, who has not done much work with chess players before, how did you prepare yourself for this assignment when it came in? Clearly, you've done so much work with all the top athletes, so that part but the chess aspect might be different, no?
Yeah, so I mean that's a very good question, that, and I probably prepared myself in 3 ways. One, knowing that chess is the 20th sport that I've worked in at the highest level, and certainly with the other 19 sports, my experience was the principles of the mental game, things like excellent preparation, not overthinking, not underthinking, pressure, fear, um, confidence, doubt, negative thoughts. All of those things are apply equally across all of the other 19 sports that I've worked in. They just apply differently with different personalities because, those play out differently, and they apply differently in different sports, team sports, individual sports. So I assumed that the principles would then translate into chess. Um, I also went in knowing, for example, when I first started working with the Indian cricket team in 2008, when I arrived, I knew I didn't know India. I didn't know Indians. I didn't know the personalities like, as I said, Tendulkars, and Laxmans, Dravids, Gangulis, Kumblas of this world. So I went in knowing that there's a whole lot I don't know. And the only way to find out is to ask questions, pay attention, and to listen. So I certainly went into this conversation with Gukesh really wanting to listen, ask questions, hear him talk, get into his head. And at the end of that, he needs to find the solutions in his head. They're not going to come from me because I don't know much about chess. And the other way was listening to podcasts. I went online, and that's one of my primary places of learning. You get to sit at the foot of some master, and I sat and I listened to podcasts where in interviewers that I respect have done interviews with the best chess players in the world, and just started getting something of an idea. But you know, I state very openly, I'm very comfortable in the fact that I don't know very much about chess, and I'm not going to try and start learning about chess so I can speak chess to Gukesh. I'm speaking the mental game to Gukesh. He's the chess grandmaster.
Right. And when it comes to comparing these 20 disciplines that you worked across, what did you find special about chess? What was the maybe one or two things that you thought were like, okay, this makes it completely different?
Yeah. I think what makes it completely different, and I mentioned earlier, is that, in coaching people around the mental game, like in all other sports, like I've done all my preparation and I've done my diet and I've done my training. And now maybe I think what I need to do is do a little bit of work on my mental game. Um, but it is all about the brain. The brain is the primary tool. All the other sports require speed or strength or agility or hand-eye coordination or ball skills. Um, Chess is it's all about the brain. Everything goes on in the brain. So we're talking, when I'm talking to Gukesh, I'm talking about his primary tool of performance, where with all the other sports, I'm talking about a tool that supports the performance. It's not the primary tool, and it's obviously everyone accepts that the brain and thinking in the mind is a very important tool, but in chess, it's everything.
Hmm. One thing that has been spoken about Gukesh is that he's able to sort of up his game at the right time. Like at the candidates, he won it at his first, when he was just 17 years old, his first appearance. Even now, when he played the Olympiad, when there was this key game against China, he kind of, everyone thought it will be a draw, but he won it. So he's like this big match player. Do you see something similar in him and some cricketers or someone who have been like these big match players there?
Yes, you're quite right there. That is something that is a real gift and really unique to Gukesh, is that he certainly does seem to, well, we've seen that he delivers results in those big games, as you mentioned, in the candidates and at the Olympiad. But in talking to him and understanding his thinking going into those big games or those really high pressure moments, he really does thrive. It really does bring the best out in him, and uh, he is what one would call a big match temperament player. And there's really not many of those around in many sports. We take a sport like cricket. I've done a lot of work with the best cricketers in the world over the last 20 years, and I've maybe come across the number wouldn't amount to 10
Oh.
in the last 20 years. It would probably be more like 5 or 6, like genuine big match temperament players who the biggest moment brings the best out of them. A great example, probably the best example at the moment, although he didn't have a great tournament recently, is Virat Kohli. If you just look at the T20 World Cup earlier this year, he really didn't perform in the round robins, even the quarterfinal, the semi-final, and I spoke to him, the day before the final, and we just spoke about, it doesn't matter that you haven't performed so far because the other players have got you to the final. And everyone knows, the opponent knows, this is the time when you really get to stand up. This is when you get to play your best cricket. This is what, you know, Virat Kohli is made for finals, and finals are made for Virat Kohli. So, it's wonderful. It's a real blessing. It's quite unique to have that kind of mental makeup to, those really big moments. Most people, they crumble under the pressure. It's just too much, the pressure and the expectation. But people like Virat, people like Gukesh, it just seems to bring the best out of them, and that's really exciting. It's awesome to work with people like that and really get to understand what is a big match temperament mind work like. How does it work? How is it different to other people who suffer, anxieties, pressures, fears of the big moment? So that is something that, regardless of how well, Ding plays and how good a form he's on, he is meeting somebody who the chance of Gukesh playing his best chess and Ding meeting a very difficult opponent, it's going to be because this is going to bring the best out of him, and Ding is going to meet the best Gukesh that we see, and we've seen it, twice this year in the candidates and in the Olympiad. We're going to see it again, hopefully, in a couple of weeks' time.
Right. But this big match temperament, do you think that it is something that can be developed, or you see that this is a skill that someone comes with innately from a very young age?
It's a little bit of both. There definitely is something innate about that, but it also can be worked on. So, Gikesh, that's raw material, that's a talent, or I would say it's a gift that he's got, and we can certainly hone that gift and learn how to use that tool or that gift even more smartly, hold it for longer. Um, it's someone who doesn't have big match temperament and who tends to, crumble or feel pressure and play worse under those big moments. You can, through my experience, you can definitely get them to be better, to manage themselves better, manage their nerves better, manage their strategy better. But to take someone who is not a big match temperament player and turn them into a Virat Kohli or Gukesh, it's I'm sure it's possible. Maybe I just lack the skills to have been able to do that, but so far I haven't been able to do that. Virat already had that when I worked with him. A guy like Gautam Gambhir, if we go back to the 2011 Cricket World Cup, going into that World Cup, the players and, was sitting with Gary Kirsten in the inner sanctum of Indian cricket. We knew that the two players who this is going to bring the best out in them is Gautam Gambhir and MS Dhoni. And while we had two really exciting players, for example, in Virender Sehwag, if Sehwag bats for 15 or 18 overs in a 50-over game, the game's gone because he's so exciting and explosive. And Sachin was playing, he's the most beautiful player to watch. But when it comes to really producing under pressure, we were quietly, certainly in my head, knowing the players, and I'm going, well, Gambhir and Dhoni are actually our two trump cards here. And as it happens, the two of them got 90s and saw the India home to win the 2011 World Cup.
Wow.
And Gukesh is one of those players.
Amazing, amazing. You spoke about this thing about Dhoni, and I think one of the things that everyone relates to him is about how to detach yourself from the results and focus on the process. And I see that also a very, very important thing in chess players. Everyone keeps talking about that. Don't get attached to the result, don't get attached to your elo rating. But it is so difficult to do that because all conversations keep happening around it. Your invites are dependent on it, and so
Yeah.
on. So how
Yeah.
how does how is it possible to sort of be able to do that according to you?
It's, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's that saying in sport to focus on the process and let the result look after itself. What that talks to is it means focus on what's in front of you, on the move that's in front of you. Focus on the board as it lies in front of you and play the board that's in front of you. Then you're fully focused, you're fully present, your mind is on task. And that's when you get to play the best chess, or it doesn't matter what sport. If you're focusing on what's unfolding on you in front of you, then you're present. The result is always, it either exists in the future or it's a past result that exists in the past. And if we are focused on the future or the past, that is a distraction because we are not focused on what is sitting in front of us now. So that's one of the big things, is the result exists in the future or in the past. And that it is of no value when you're busy playing. That's number one. And I would go so far as to say that that's saying for any athlete in any sport, focus on the process, leave the result to look after itself, as Dhoni speaks about so much of the time. That for me, that's like the McLaren. If I'm not really a car person, but let's pick a really cool car. That is the McLaren of sayings for mental coaching in sport. But the problem is, because we all know that saying, it's like everybody owns a McLaren. So it's not so cool anymore. And we're looking for something clever or fancier. But the reality is, it is still the McLaren. It is still probably the most powerful concept if you really get it and digest it and internalize it, what does it mean to stay focused on the process and leave the result? Because the better I'm focused on the process in this present moment and what's unfolding in or out in front of me right now, that gives the best possible chance of having the desirable result happening. And if we take that and we expand it to life, you know, life is a journey. It's not about the destination. It's the same thing. Focus on the journey. And in fact, well, life is probably easier because the destination of life is death, and we don't want to rush to that result.
True, true. But one of the things that I realized in order to have this mindset is you need to be slightly detached from what you're doing, not just results, but like just this detachment. It is something which is not so easy to bring about, right? What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with this word kind of being detached?
Yeah. So it's not so much being detached because if you're focused on the present moment, you're not detached, you're fully engaged and you're fully focused. It is our ego
Mm.
that attaches itself to results because in our ego, we want to look good, we want people to like us, we want to be right. Um, and so ego is directly attached to results. If I did well in the past, ego wants to talk about it and hang on to it because it makes me feel good and everyone loves me. If we do badly in the past, ego is affronted, so it wants to try and defend itself or blame somebody else, or it doesn't look good, or maybe then it drives us to go and work harder. And it's the same with the future. Ego is attached to doing well in future because we want people to like us. We want people to say nice things. We want to feel good. And so that's the source of pressure because the more important it is to achieve a result and a good result in the future, the more pressure we feel. That's the anatomy of pressure or the definition. It's directly attached to the importance of a result in the future. And fear, which or pressure or fear or anxiety or stress is the other massive mental obstacle in sport. And that comes directly from the ego's attachment to not wanting to do badly in the future because I will look bad, I will feel bad, it'll be really uncomfortable. So I'm really scared of doing badly or losing. And that's the origin of fear, of stress, of anxiety. So the two biggest mental obstacles to performance for any athlete across certainly all 20 sports I've worked in is pressure and fear. And that comes from the ego's attachment. Pressure, the ego's attachment to desperate to win. And fear or stress is the ego is so scared of losing. But when you're secure within who you are as a human being, that separates us who we are in our essence, in our character, in our esteem. That is separate to ego. So we need to detach from ego but detaching from ego means being okay with who I am, and a lot of that is a lot of the work. And I'm happy with my preparation. I'm happy with my skills. I'm happy with my knowledge. I'm happy with my coaching team. I know I've done the best preparation. I'm in the best space I can be. And also, I'm happy and comfortable knowing that I'm not the
Vidit
finished
Gujrati
product. I
coming into
don't
his
know
game
every
against
opening
the
move. I
world
don't
number
know
one.
every response to every move on the chessboard. I know there's a chance I'm going to end up in a defensive position. I know there's a chance I'm going to lose. And you know what? I'm okay with that. And when we're okay, then we're detaching from the ego's attachment to lose. And when we are not desperate to win, we detach from the ego's need to win. And then it frees us up
Mm,
to be fully focused in the process. It's
beautiful.
easy to say in this interview, it's very difficult to do. And that's where only the best players in the world, or the best athletes in the world, or the most enlightened human beings, they get it right more often than others. The majority of the rest don't even realize that they're caught up in needing to look good and they're caught up in success and failure and they live their lives in the past or the future. And that's how most people and most athletes live their lives.
Wow.
They're not present.
What you just mentioned, is something that I have read in books, let's say by Eckhart Tolle, or these spiritual books of. Do you think that that is an important thing that the sports players should look into? Is it something that you have yourself looked into? Because the ego, being in the present moment, all of this is so important from a spiritual sense.
Sport is a part of life. It's not different to life. And the rules or the guidelines or the principles of living a really successful, fruitful life have been around forever. It's been written long time ago. Whichever scriptures you choose or spiritual path, there was some master, and there's modern day masters who help us, give us guidelines to living a successful life. And those guidelines, whether it's Eckhart Tolle, whether it's Buddha, whether it's in the Bhagavad Gita, whether it's in the Quran or the Bible, or you listen to any of the modern day spiritual gurus, they're all giving us guidelines to living life. And those guidelines apply 100% to sport. We just don't do a very good job of translating what do these scriptures or these principles mean and how do they play out in sport. So yes, and in fact, I would go so far as to say I've studied sports psychology, the postgraduate level. The work that I do, I would say I probably draw 1% of my work I do with athletes from sports psychology, and 99% from the principles of living life from those teachings. And it's interesting. I haven't come across too many athletes who do a good job. Even the really spiritual or religious athletes, they live a spiritual and religious life, and then they live a sporting life, and they do a pretty poor job of translating what does this mean and how do I translate it into sport. And some of the biggest breakthroughs that athletes I've worked with have had is when they realize, oh, so you mean this applies to my sport as well. So yes, of course it's important and it's available to all of us, that knowledge. But just like in sport, we know to focus on the process and leave the result to look after itself, but we don't do a good job of following it. And it's just like the spiritual teachings of how to live life. We know what they are. At some point we're exposed to them, but most of us don't do a very good job of following them.
Wow, this is tremendous, and I think coming from you, this is going to open up the minds of so many youngsters or so many chess players who are going to listen to this. If there's anything that you would recommend them to sort of get ready on this path, what would those materials be?
Um, sure, that's a good question. For me personally, you mentioned Eckhart Tolle, his book A New Earth.
Yes.
It's
It's on
there's
ego, right?
amazing. Yeah, there's a lot of things. It's very short chapters. There's amazing insight and depth into that book. I know if I read it as a sort of an 18, 19, 20, 21 year old, I probably wouldn't have understood it or thought it was rubbish. So, but I think the youngsters are far cleverer than what we were when we were youngsters. So that's a good resource. There's a reason I wrote my book is to share some of this wisdom and translate it into its practical application in sport. But I would say, the thing I would say to every athlete is work on your sport. Do everything you can to be the best chess player or whatever sport it is. Focus on that, but spend an equal amount of time working on being the best human being you can be. Like you work on your strategy in sport, work on your character, work on your values, understand what are my ethics, what am I going to say no to, what am I going to say yes to. We have goals in sport. What do I want to achieve? Have goals in life. What kind of person do I want to be? What I want people to be saying about me at my funeral, for example, and understand that goal, and then go and understand, well, what is the strategy? How do I need to live my life to be the best human being I can be? And what I can tell you, the more secure within you are as a human being, comfortable is like, I'm okay with what I know and I'm okay with what I don't know, that actually detaches us from our ego. Because if I'm comfortable as a human being, I don't desperately need to win in order to feel good. And I'm not terrified of losing because I know I'll win, and it doesn't mean I'm great. People say I'm great, but it just means I won this time. And if I do badly, people say you're not good enough or you won't make it or you see you crumbled under pressure. That's their opinion. It doesn't mean I'm not going to make it. It just means that this time I didn't do well. And that's okay. And that's what, the top athletes really realize is they don't judge themselves by their results, yet the whole world judges them by their results. But you are not your results. Work on yourself as a person, work on your sport. Your results will go up and they will go down. And people will love you when you do well, and people criticize when you do badly. That's just their story. For you, stay the same person, knowing I'll have success. It doesn't mean I'm great. It just means today went well. And know that you will have failure. Everyone has failure. And no, it doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means today things went badly and I probably got the opportunity to learn a lesson. Keep separating yourself from your results. You are not your results. Don't chase winning too hard and don't run too hard from losing. Focus on being the best person and the best athlete you can be, and that's focusing on the process.
This is very inspiring, Paddy. Thank you so much for sharing this knowledge with us. Just last couple of questions I have for you. One is, would you ever be open to work with more chess players in the future?
I'm always open to work with interesting people doing interesting stuff in sport. I think I've been spoilt getting to work with Gukesh as my first chess player because I think he's obviously a special chess player. In my experience, I've come to learn he's a really special human being. So I've been very spoiled. It's like going into cricket and getting to work with Virat Kohli as your first client. Where do you go to from there?
True, true. Yeah. And lastly, what do you think about the World Championship match that will happen? It's now less than 10 days away. Will you follow it? And what are your sort of, because you must have also studied Ding in some detail. What do you feel will happen?
So I'm super excited for Gukesh. I'm super excited for the occasion. Of course, I'm going to follow it. Uh, but I really do walk my words. Is I'm not predicting. I'm not looking at the results. I'm just helping Gukesh prepare his mind for the first game, and then the second game, and then the third game. And it's one move at a time, one game at a time. And if he does that to the best of his ability, well, then we'll leave the results to speak for itself.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paddy, for doing this, talking to us, and also for helping Gukesh in his journey. Because Gukesh winning and becoming a world champion will not just be a big moment for Indian chess, but for I think the world of chess. He would be the youngest ever world champion, so
Yeah,
it would be absolutely amazing.
yeah, yeah. Very exciting. Can't wait for the unfolding of these next 14 games.
Thank you.